welcome to The Art of Adventure. This is episode 290 with Ladan Jiracek. The Art of Adventure is the podcast where we look at human potential, entrepreneurship, unconventional lifestyles, and cutting-edge science. I'm your host, lead explorer, and guide, Derek Loudermilk. You can go to derekloudermilk.com for the show notes of this episode. And if you are a thought leader, which is a coach, author, influencer, speaker, podcaster, retreat host, then I've got a special group mastermind that you might want to consider. We're starting February 2020. That's coming right up. And this will help train you to get to six figures in your business. If you're not there already, if you're already at six figures, we'll help take you to multiple six figures. And we're training multiple levels. We're training the skills that you need, things like self-expression, marketing, sales, storytelling, charisma, confidence, all these things. But we're also going to be implementing a lot of these metaphysical secret weapons that I've learned from investigating a lot of the things that I'm learning on this podcast and a lot of the research that I'm doing behind the scenes. So it's really exciting what we're going to be doing this year. You can find out more about that program as well on derekloudermilk.com. So today's episode is with my friend Ladan Jiracek, and he is the host of the Travel Wisdom Podcast. He's been a longtime travel podcaster. The Art of Adventure, I think we started our shows at about the same time. And he's been to more than 100 countries. And we've met up in at least 4 different countries. He and I have created courses together. We've lived together. We've traveled together. And it's been a while since we've connected and done a show. And he is slowing down his traveling a little bit, although not that much. And I've just bought a house. And I've established a more permanent base. I'm less of a digital nomad than I used to be. So we decided to have an episode because there's this part of the hero's journey where the hero essentially comes back to his home tribe, his home country. And it seems like, if you just follow this sort of script of, the cycle of the hero's journey, that he and I are both in this phase where we're slowing down. Ladan is working on brain implants. He also happens to be the host of the Brain Implant Podcast. And so what we talk a lot about is what it's like to go from long-term travel, coming back and reintegrating into settling down. And this is, since we're both interviewers and we're both, sort of widely read, this conversation is kind of like we're interviewing each other and kind of like having a friend's conversation, updating each other on what's going on in our lives. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Ladan Jiracek. All right, welcome to the first episode of Ladan and Derek interviewing each other, catching up. We don't have a name for this yet, but let's start with. I'd love to hear just an update from your end, since it's a while since we've talked. I know you're living in Florida. I think you've decided on a Ph.D. and we'd just love to hear, what's exciting in your world right now.
Yeah, sure. I'm excited to be doing this, Derek. It's been a long time since we've, been in the same place, hung out together in person. It was about 18 months ago in Bali, and a lot has happened since then. I've moved to Florida, been working here as a laboratory technician at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and I should be starting my Ph.D. in January here after lots of crazy stuff at the beginning of this year. But I'm pretty excited about that. So it's been a really, really interesting year and a half.
And I'm curious, how you decided to actually do the PhD, because we've talked about that before. I obviously dropped out of my PhD program, and how you decided on this particular program.
Yeah, so part of it is fate, or part of it is, not up to me, and part of it is up to me. So, I was very picky with what I wanted, and I've kind of realized after some time, I'm just like, well, I don't really like want a job. I can't really imagine myself just working here. It has to be like special. It has to be, a certain thing. So I kind of realized like, well, PhD and research and like discovering new things is kind of what I have to do in order for me to stay sane. And yeah, so part of it was like, who would accept me or even accept me and then not accept me. And part of it was, which ones do I like? And I've known this professor, like, so this isn't the original professor that I was working for here, but it's a guy across the street and actually somebody that does something that's more aligned with what I like. So it kind of worked out well. And I mean, he had funding and he's just like, yeah, sure, I'll take you on. We need help with this project. And then we'll figure stuff out as it comes along. So yeah, it's kind of it's like life, it's kind of part your plans and part out of your hands.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that, I think my reasons for going into a PhD were so I could be called a doctor and so that I could, play outside and do field work. And it sounds like your reasons are perhaps more aligned with ultimately what you really want to be doing. Like, especially if you feel like you need to do this to stay sane, that seems like probably a better reason to embark on a PhD.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's kind of like I really like the beginning parts of things. I really like setting things up. I really like, I don't know, discovering things. I feel like I have a lot of ideas and always want to, kind of initialize it. But I kind of see, I don't know, like industry or like jobs or something like this. You're just kind of maintaining things. You're just like something's already been set up and you just have to make sure it doesn't mess up. And I don't know, that doesn't really, fit well with my personality. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm correct in this, but I kind of see the PhD as more like you are starting things and, I also have an eye towards entrepreneurship and starting businesses. So I think this is kind of the better way to do that than inside of a company. So yeah, I think, I don't know. We'll find out if it's a good choice or not in like 5 or 10 years.
And is this in brain interfaces? Is that still the track?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm doing brain-machine interfaces and kind of nerve implants. And this project that I've been like kind of recruited for, it's more for the packaging of it, making sure that the body doesn't destroy it because the body is a very corrosive environment and it tries to, destroy anything that gets put inside of it because, it's a foreign body. It's a foreign body response. So this is kind of like a way to make sure that that doesn't happen, or if it does, that the device still kind of stays functioning. And this is a huge problem in the industry and apparently one that a lot of people have tried to, like people would love to have solved. So it's kind of cool. It's like, oh, there's a built-in, market for this right away.
So here's maybe like a deeper philosophical question. Theoretically, right, these interfaces can help us get sort of superpowers, right? Like connect to other people and just have access to our technology. And also, like, the more we rely on technology, the less we're like perhaps cultivating our own abilities, our own wisdom or insight or sort of connection with, I don't know, the earth or just like all these things that sort of ancient people without technology were really good at. So where do you fall in terms of like how this sort of technology could perhaps take us away from like these other abilities that we may cultivate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty positive about it. Actually, I remember when we were in Croatia together, I finished reading a book, The Rational Optimist, and it's really, really good because it kind of says like, things have been good and things have been getting better, and that's really not likely to change. So I see, neural implants, I see like really any new form of technology as a tool. And a tool by itself is neutral. There's not really anything like a hammer isn't good or bad. It's what you do with it, so you can use it to build a house or you can use it to bash somebody's skull in. And, depending on how you use that, you can have different results. So I've been very happy with my technology, like computers and cell phones and everything like this. And it's been amazing for me because on one hand, yeah, true. I am kind of like in this artificial world and, Facebook and like making you angry and all this kind of stuff. But on the other hand, I also use it for, a lot of like accelerated learning, so I listen to podcasts at, faster speeds. I listen to YouTube videos at faster speeds. So I learn a lot of stuff. And so I have like this access to knowledge and, granted, not everybody uses it for this, but it's a tool. Like you can use it for whatever you want it to. It's a multiplier. So whichever direction you want to multiply, you can multiply positive and negative numbers. Fun fact, math lesson of the day. But yeah, so that's kind of how I see it.
Okay. Fair enough. And so what I was thinking about with this podcast with this episode, this chat, is that both of us, we've been traveling for a long time, and that's been a big part of our podcast, a big part of our personalities. And now if you commit to a PhD, you're basically putting down roots and you're staying in one place most of the time. And on my end, now I have a family and just buying a house and committing to stay in St. Louis for several years. And it's like, it seems like an end of a sort of a cycle, like when we talk about the hero's journey, we talk about first there's the call to adventure, and then there's all, then you go through all these trials and tribulations, and then finally you get some treasure and you return home. And it seems like maybe we're at the point where like both of us are like reintegrating into our normal society again. And I'd just love to get your thoughts on how you view that for yourself right now.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely see that as well. And, I've been thinking about this lately. It's kind of like the part of the hero's journey is also, coming back with gifts, or coming back with, newfound wisdom, and maybe seeing your home with newfound eyes and being like, oh, this is actually, the best place, or something like this. So that's kind of how I feel too, is like, I always was like, I want to get out of the US. I want to definitely just live outside of there. I don't ever want to go back. It's like, capitalist, dirty, money grubbing, and like people treat each other really badly, and I kind of want to be in a more egalitarian place. But coming back, it's also been interesting, because the reason I had to come back is because, it doesn't work anywhere else. Like, this industry that I'm in, it really doesn't function anywhere else in the world. Like, there's just not enough money for research. And so it's kind of limiting in that. And I was also like, well, why is that? Why is it so dependent on this? Like, why can't you, I don't know, like, why can't you do this kind of stuff? And I think it's because of the culture, because of the way of doing things. So I kind of see that as well. Like, this is part of a hero's journey. Like, I went out, I learned a bunch of stuff. And, now when I talk to my colleagues or something like this, I sound like this crazy dude. And people like literally say like, I will believe anything that you say that you've done, because you just had such a crazy life. And, that's kind of a cool thing. But yeah, so it's definitely the end of an era, but maybe not too. Like, I think even with a house for you and for a family, and even with me as a PhD, you can travel, you can go out and do stuff. I'm going to conferences now. So I just went to Chicago, and I'm going to be going to San Francisco in like a few days. So, because I have my side business too, kind of doing media generation for these companies, I am able to travel. And because it is in this field, it's like, oh, actually, that is actually assisting my PhD studies as well. And I'm going to try to put together some kind of, study abroad kind of thing, maybe go for a semester or two to like China or something like this. We'll see if that happens. But, there's really not a limit to this. I mean, there's always, I don't know, what is it, like some kind of professors, visiting professors or something like this. And many times there's even like a professor may be visiting in like 2-3 places, which basically means they like go there every year and just hang out for a month or 2 months and, talk to people, research. So, you can set it up, and especially with the family too. I think, if you kind of if you set it up in the right way, there's no reason it shouldn't completely stop. Okay, it's going to be different, but it's not going to completely stop.
Yeah, for sure. There's ways for us to build in travel to whatever we're doing. That's because this book I'm writing about travel and leadership, is like, okay, I need to go to Burning Man for this, or I need to go to various locations to learn things. Like, try to build in the things that we want to do and with the things that we have to do for work. But it's also different, it's like there's definitely a difference between the sort of freestyle travel where you sort of indeterminately, you don't know what your plan for the day is, and then like going to a conference because you have some objective of doing some business there or something like that. And it's really interesting to like see people who listen to the show or ask me about travel, and they're still in the sort of planning phase, or they're just getting started, and they're like got their single backpack and they're wide-eyed and stepping out into the world for the first time for a year of solo travel or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is like different phases of life, and you have to go through it. And I always I remember as a kid, like oh, I'll never like, non-cartoon TV, that's just like, it's, but then you do, like, they're just like, okay, I can watch the news and not be like bored to death. But as a kid, you were, and it's just kind of this different phase, and part of it is like maturity too, and especially with children, that's just like, boom, maturity. You have to be mature now because you can't be going out getting drunk in the middle of whatever Bosnia or something like this, and like you used to when you were 18. So I think it's just different phases of life, and unfortunately or fortunately, we all go through this.
Yeah, I'm actually so this book that I'm working on is as it's developing, one of the main theses is about how identity changes through travel. And given the name of your podcast, I'm curious about if there have been any particular moments in your travels that really sort of changed your identity about who you are.
I don't know if I've ever explicitly thought about this, like if it really just like, okay, I'm this and now I'm this, and I just have this flash of realization. But I think there is kind of some stuff that you just like, oh, the world works in a different way than I thought, or just like, oh, why is this like this and not like this? And I think that would be the more kind of realization that I would have had versus like oh, I'm a different person now. I mean, maybe that does happen, like, but the very first time that you travel, and I've heard lots of stories. On my show, I've interviewed lots of people, like, people, kids leave, about 18 years old, and they go travel, and then they come back, and the parents are like, wow, this is a completely different person. So I think that happens more in the beginning, or it's such a more rapid change in the beginning, and then it kind of slows down. But yeah, I mean, maybe it was that, just kind of that independence of first going to go travel, and then just first being like self-sufficient in like on the other side of the planet in a place that nobody speaks your language, and that's pretty cool. How about you?
Well, now that I was, as you were answering, I was trying to think if I had there have been definitely these specific moments that just sort of, either when you talk about self-sufficiency, when you're like, I did something and I never thought I could do it, but this concept of the world works a different way than I've thought. And I'm wondering, like, underneath that, the world works a different way than I thought it did. Some people, like, they discover that everybody's the same and everybody's, just trying to get through their lives. And that seems to be a theme that comes up. And definitely I feel like people I've met all around the world are helpful and friendly. And, I can now expect the good from everybody. But I'm trying to think about that concept of like just a frame shift for how the world works. And I'm not. Yeah. What do you think? Is there any examples for you, and like when you understand like the world is actually different than you thought it was?
Yeah, I mean, this is I guess the thing that I've been going through lately. I've been kind of realizing, I've always been like very liberal and open-minded, kind of maybe socialist or something like this, and like egalitarian, as I said before, and now I've been realizing, especially coming back here, it's just like that kind of doesn't work, or maybe you need like a different proportion of that, and the capitalism and the selfishness is actually good, because that's actually what makes things work, and that's how you that's how you assure that things will actually work, at least for one person, which is you. And if you're doing it well, then you have to, I guess, maximize the I don't know, things working for other people too, and that's how you really become successful. So I don't know. I've kind of been going through that, and seeing the different levels of funding and business success and financial success in different areas of the world based on this. So like I had always wanted to live in Germany, because it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of my place. This is like the best setup, I think. University is free. Healthcare is like very cheap, and you're paying just some small monthly thing, and it just kind of works. It's just very logical, very reasonable, and I was never, I guess, embarrassed for something that, like, oh wow, this is what the Germans did. Like, that's so stupid. How could they do that? But it felt like it was happening a lot for the U.S. But now, kind of coming back, it's just like, well, I don't know if it's sustainable actually, like in the long term. So, and I guess the results kind of show that. So, I mean, the results of businesses, or I don't know, number of millionaires, or how much money you can make even, so there in Germany, like as a engineer, you are very well paid if you're making, $30,000 a year. That's just like, wow, that's good job. But here in the US, that's like, that's barely scraping by. And, the costs of stuff aren't that much different. So it's just really being so much more, I don't know, you just literally have less money, just have less money to throw around. It's like, well, like, why is that? And I don't know. So I've been kind of going through that for the last, I don't know, year or something like this. It's just like, what is the difference? And that's kind of been changing for me, even, after the travel, post travel, kind of the reflection of, what I've seen. Why was Africa different than, Germany? Why was Germany different than, Thailand? So, I've been reading a lot of books, but that's been kind of my process lately. And I've kind of come to realize, like, well, maybe US isn't so bad. Like, it just, stuff works here. Like, it's somehow it does. And so I guess we kind of have to accept it.
So I think most people in the US feel like there's a lot wrong, and maybe they can't necessarily explicitly say, but there's like sort of pervasive sense of dissatisfaction with what we have going, and or that it's just not optimal. No matter like sort of where you are socioeconomically, even if people are super positive, even if they've come to like read something like The Rational Optimist and they have a positive view of their life or any of these things, they also probably, I think, people think like there's a lot messed up things. So I'm curious about places like Germany. Like, do they have the same sense of this system could be a lot better, or are there other places in the world where people are like, especially I'm thinking of places like Bali, where it's like very community focused and they just like don't care about money as much, for example. They seem to be quite happy with things. So I get the sense that they're much happier with their sort of like socio-economic system than we are with ours. But what's the feeling of that in Germany? Do you know?
Yeah, so I mean that's the thing is like, I was in Germany for 3 years doing my master's, and in the beginning it was kind of like a honeymoon period. It was just like, oh, this is perfect, this is great. And the blemishes start to come out after maybe a year or two. You start to get to know the language, and you actually see what people are talking about. And then it becomes a little bit more real. It becomes like any other place. And so I've especially seen this, in Slovakia and Czech Republic, which is where my family's from, and I speak the language, and they're quite negative over there about this kind of stuff. And they're like, oh, things are going badly, and there's not enough money, and people are kind of unhappy about this. So. And it was kind of funny. I was last week. I was talking to a Frenchman, and he learned Czech. So that was really impressive. I'm just like, wow, that's really cool. That's a difficult language, and why? But he was saying like people seem so happy and kind of carefree, and they're not really worried about this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, man, the reality is so different. Like my reality and your reality of the Czech people are so different. Like for me, they're actually, I kind of consider them kind of pessimistic and negative. And so it was very interesting. So I wonder if you did get into the Balinese culture, spoke the language and lived there for a few years, if things would become a little bit more real and it's not this honeymoon period like it may have been like for that 6 months or whatever short time that you were there. So I think everywhere is real. People are always going to complain, and it can always be better. But once you realize that like it's like that everywhere, then I don't know.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point, which is that learning the language, getting better at German, sort of allowed you to better understand how people really felt. And maybe this French guy hasn't got to that level with his Slovakian, and I haven't bothered to sort of become fluent in any of the languages of places I've been, just because, we go to so many places. I don't want to fill up my head with languages I'm going to use once. But you definitely miss context socially with like what the vibe of a place is if you can't, if you're not fluent in the language, which has me sort of really looking forward to what you're working on. Like if potentially we can like use telepathy and just sort of understand each other without having to speak language, I would be really excited for that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could, just directly transmit a feeling, and that would be very useful. But yeah, like for the language stuff, I mean, maybe think about it like, okay, let's say 10% of the population speaks like excellent English that they can converse with you and express all their ideas, and to really have them frankly speak to you, you almost need two of those people, and they need to already be in a discussion. They're not going to like open up to a foreigner about, whatever problems or money problems that they have or something like this. So it is kind of a rare thing. So yeah, I think, I don't know. I don't even know if the telepathy would work that much. Like, how do you get like some deep piece of information out of somebody if they're not necessarily so inclined to share it with you? I mean, either because it might not be polite, or it might like, okay, I've only known you for 6 months. Why would I talk about political problems or something like this? But yeah, like I think. I don't know. It's like you have to access a deep part of a hard drive, in that person's brain, and I don't know how you do that. I don't know if neural implants could do that, because it's almost like you have to be thinking about something in order to pull it out with an implant.
Yeah, I'm just imagining, that we're restricted already by, like, if we're trying to describe something to someone, even the best poets and writers, right? They're confined by what words mean and how they can use them, and it sort of limits the breadth of how you can relay, my experience of the world to you. But I would love to sort of like not be bound by language or really anything, but if I could just be like, here's my experience, and then like get it over to you, and you could be like, I understand your experience. That ultimately would be really amazing.
Yeah, express it through song and dance, or maybe like I'm thinking like an instrument might be good too. That actually conveys emotion pretty well, and yeah, I think there's many ways to do it. It's a hell of a learning curve to learn an instrument well enough to convey emotions. So yeah, I think all of these have very, very big learning curves, regardless.
Yeah. So let's you sent me the other day an NPR a radio clip, I guess, from a show about kids who remember past lives. And since you're always learning a bunch of stuff, and I'm always learning a bunch of stuff, I thought we could talk about some things that are just really interesting to us or have blown our minds. And so I'm curious, what how did you find that clip, and what made you think to send it my way?
Yeah, sure. I mean, actually, maybe we should explain to the listeners why I would send it to you. I mean, like, why? Well, I guess I'll explain it. You just had your second child,
Yeah,
so
thank you.
congratulations, or a year
Yeah, she's
back or
almost a
something
year.
like this.
Wow.
So, wow, that's crazy. So yeah, I mean, I sent it to you because I remember we were talking about it. Axel, your first son. I was just like, well, I've heard about this. People. Kids, once they about 4 or 5 years old, they say some really weird stuff like, oh, I remember when I was older and I was a smith, I was a silversmith, in this town or something like this. So they're just saying really specific stuff, and like mentioning names and locations and just weird stuff that they have never had access to. And so it kind of suggests, past lives or something like this. And, I know your wife is really into this kind of stuff. So, we had talked about this. So that's why I had sent it to you, was because, we had this conversation. I mean, I don't know if I had it with you, but I definitely had it with Heidi. So I thought that was really cool. And, I think Axel's going to be coming to that, age in a year or two where he could start doing that kind of stuff, where it's just like weird, just like, what are you talking about? And who? And then, potentially there's even possibilities of, it actually lining up and actually being true. And you'd be like, hey, I think I found your dead grandfather, like go to a random family. Like, he seems to know a lot of stuff, and potentially track him down. So this radio story was talking about that. And it kind of was like, oh, well, there's this, potentially one special child, and, seems to have past lives, access or something, saying some really weird stuff. But then it kind of concluded with, well, the parents might be also looking at it this way, where it's like everything that they do is special, and it just could be kind of a mindset, and you're kind of looking for something where nothing exists. So I don't know. I mean, I can't wait to have kids to test this out for myself and have a microphone ready and just be like, okay, what crazy stuff are you going to come up with? But, because you're ahead of me in that case, like I think you should have a microphone ready at all times when they start saying like, oh yeah, when I was in this village in Luxembourg or something like this, I was the town plumber and I was doing it. It's like, what?
Yeah, so I have had friends, at least one friend who's told me stories about their kid remembering past lives, and the body of research, the scientifically sort of validated research behind this. There's like 150,000 cases that they've documented where the kids will say, here's who I was, here's where I lived, here's all the people that I knew, and you can go and look up this person's life and like verify all of those facts, and then sometimes they even take the kid back to meet the family, and the kid's like, I remember when you had your bar mitzvah or something, and they're like, there's no way you could have known that if you weren't actually this person. And with that much evidence, it's basically saying consciousness, or like the individual identity, is not bound. Like death is not the end, or it's basically saying there's rebirth or multiple lives. That's a pretty big thing to accept as reality. But I think with that much evidence, we sort of have to say, yeah, that's probably what's happening.
Yeah, and I mean, you're going to be in the position to test it. I mean, as a scientist, like hopefully that Ph.D., the bit of Ph.D. training that you had isn't lost on you, and you're going to be able to brush off the scientific method and test it on your own kids.
So one thing that I have started to experience, my kids haven't started like bringing up any past lives, and maybe they won't. Maybe they don't have past lives, or maybe they're not connected to it, or something else like that. But I have experienced co-dreaming, and this is something I had read about when I was researching lucid dreaming. That they validated that people can have the same dream and sort of share the same dream memories, sort of independently verified by third parties who are also in the dream, things like that. And so I was like, oh, that'd be really cool. So I started doing this thing where I was like, okay, I'll see you, people say like, I'll see you in your dreams. They say that to their kids, but I actually started, like planning, like, okay, what are we going to dream about? Like, let's both set the same sort of intention for dream time, so that we have something for our subconscious to sort of grab onto when we're in dream state. And so we had a dream where both of us were, in my experience of the dream, we were both playing outside of this house, and this meteor landed, and it was a giant ruby meteor, and then we decided to crack it open, and inside was an amethyst, and that was like the central event of the dream. And in the morning we were talking about it, and he was like, it wasn't a ruby, it was a big black. No, he said it wasn't amethyst inside, it was black inside. And then, but there's actually some very dark amethyst, so perhaps he was like seeing the same thing but had slightly different memory of the colors. But basically he was recounting the same thing that we did. We cracked open a rock and saw like a different color on the inside, and he recounted that to me in the morning without me prompting him. And that just totally blew my mind, that like he was telling me the same story that I experienced in my dream the night before.
That's crazy. Wait, so what color amethyst was it for you?
So it was purple for me. It's just standard, like when you open a geode and you see amethyst inside.
Wow. That's really cool. Wait, but maybe, I mean, okay, let's look at this skeptically. Maybe let's try to blow this apart. Maybe were you guys watching some kind of movie about amethyst meteors or something like this right before, or I don't know, read a story or something like this, or is there some way you could have been primed for this?
Yeah, I was curious about that too, and I don't think I had sort of talked about it. The only way it could have happened if I was telling the dream to my wife and he somehow like overheard it earlier and then like decided that was his dream, but I don't think I was talking about it. But that would definitely be a possibility. So I want to replicate it. I want to like co-dream consistently so that we can sort of eliminate that doubt.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. So is there a way, I mean, you had been talking about lucid dreaming, like being aware that you're dreaming and then being able to control that. So I guess you're kind of maybe not a dream expert, but a dream enthusiast. Do you think there's some way you could have this co-dreaming happen more often?
Well, I have had lucid dreams a few times, and if you prioritize it, then you can have them much more frequently. I interviewed Robert Wagner, who has had, he's a lucid dreaming expert. He's had like 10,000 lucid dreams or something. And at one point when he was really focusing on it, he was having 3 or 4 in a night. So like a lot of density of being aware that you're in the dream, but you sort of have to like be in shape for it, kind of like being in shape for a sport. Like you have to focus a lot of your sort of pre-bedtime ritual and your waking up ritual and around the dream time. So because like I'm leaping up to take care of crying children in the middle of the night, like I'm often losing dreams. So that may be something that happens more in a couple of years. But the big thing is basically just, so actually the house that I'm buying right now, I'm buying it partly because of I've been doing a lot of work where I ask my subconscious for insight, because only sort of 5% of our mind power is sort of our conscious awareness, and then the rest is sort of like this unconscious programming and insight and things that we might not have access to, but in the dream state you do have access to. So you can say something like, subconscious mind, as you're falling asleep, you can say, subconscious mind, give me some guidance around whether I should buy this house, and give it to me in a way where it's easy for me to interpret whether I should or shouldn't buy the house. So you could do something like that. And then you get either maybe some symbols, or somebody shows up in a dream or whatever. But when I asked that question in the dream, it was like a picture of the house and then this sort of disembodied voice that was like, yes, buy this house. And I was like, oh my God. It was very shocking.
I think that's a yes.
Yeah, it was a huge yes, but I didn't really trust it. So actually, I sort of woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, oh my God, that's like a very clear yes. And I was sort of, the house, Heidi was like, this is my house. I want this house. And I was kind of like, it's a good house. But I didn't feel that, like hell yes, right away. And so I was a little skeptical. And so I went back, I said, okay, subconscious, like I heard that big yes, but like, can you give me more information? Like, why is it a yes? And so then I went back to sleep and I had a second dream, and there was like all this symbology of, there was like, I was driving a sports car, convertible, and this like big machine crane like lowered a giant Galapagos tortoise into my convertible. And I was like, what does that mean? So then it's kind of fun, because then like I asked on Facebook, and like 30 people weighed in on like, what does it mean to have a tortoise in your dreams and driving a convertible? So basically the conclusion was, listen to your subconscious, buy the house, and, have faith that it's the right house.
Wait, do you think the tortoise thing was in relation to the house, or do you think that was just a random thing?
No, because I was driving away, like I had in the dream, I was like parked in front of the house in the convertible, and then I was like driving away from it, and then the tortoise got lowered in. So the house was in that dream as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Weird. That's so weird. Yeah, I have no idea what that could be.
I know, it's cool. And then you're like, okay, it's not super clear, but then you sort of have to like, what's the overall picture? What's the context of what my subconscious is maybe trying to tell me?
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool, actually. I think you're absolutely right. Like, we don't use enough of our brains, and a lot of this subconscious or maybe dream state is unused. And so you just kind of have your body memory, muscle memory, recognize everything. And, this isn't your first house that you've bought, right? You've had some other like Airbnb houses and stuff like this. So you might recognize some things subconsciously about this house that's like, yeah, this is a green light. This is good, and it's good investment. It's a good, place to live, or something like this. So, or maybe the wife says yes, and that means it's a yes. So that could be another subconscious thing.
Right.
But yeah, I think that could be it. And you just kind of tap into that and get some deeper knowledge that you already knew, but you just didn't verbalize, I guess.
Yeah. And I had like all these sort of rational decision-making points, like a house has to have all, meet all these criteria. And, if we ever decide to move, like, could it also become an Airbnb, or, could we rent it out, or, could we put money in and like sell it for a profit? All these like different exit strategies if we had to sort of change our minds about something. So, and it met all those criteria. So I can at least feel comfortable that I've done my due diligence in terms of like the actual decision making.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that's good. And then, later on when you have that gut feeling, maybe you won't have to go to sleep next time. It'll just be a gut feeling. It'll be like, okay, I think it's good. Fulfills the criteria, fulfills the explicit guidelines, and implicitly, feels good too. So I think maybe a dream might be a crutch. It might be like a very deep, profound thing that you're doing for the first time, but later it'll be automated a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a part of it is like when you're making a big decision about your future, you can't really know whether it's going to work out how you expect until you do it. But there's this, like with stepping into the unknown, there's like a certain amount of like this, just hope this is going to work out, or just, maybe coming from an even stronger place. Like it always works out. I know it will work out one way or the other. I'm curious, like, with a move like you, like going to a PhD program, how much sort of faith in that it will be the right choice, do you have to commit to something like that?
That is an interesting question. I've also been thinking about this recently. Is I guess we are our own worst enemies, or we are our own harshest critics. And so before, I was always like, oh man, I don't know if this is going to work, or, I don't know if I'm smart enough to do this, or, whatever. And then, things are going really well, and I'm having success. And so it's just like, oh, actually, I'm decently clever. And people told me stuff like that before, and kind of held me up when I was down. But, it's kind of, you become, I don't know, you realize like, oh, actually, I am capable of doing stuff like this. So sometimes you can feel down, and it kind of goes up and down. But I guess I had to make the move. I guess there wasn't a choice. But yeah, definitely. In the end, it all kind of works out. And in the end, if you're like halfway competent, and halfway like follow up on your word and everything like this, that'll set you so far ahead of everybody else that you'll just be rocketing forward in terms of success. So I think yeah, like it's it really doesn't take much, to be, successful with whatever you do. And yeah, it'll always work out.
Yeah, that's a good, I keep reminding myself, like everything always works out. And another thing, when things are getting really hard, like this house process is, I think I've submitted something like 37 documents in order to get the loan approval. It's not as easy as you would expect, given my experience with the game of Monopoly, where it's quite easy to sort of build a real estate empire.
Could you imagine if you had to submit like 37 documents in the game of Monopoly for every property you bought?
They're like, this is how it really, that would not be fun.
And then it's an escrow for a week, and just like it'd be the longest game of Monopoly ever.
The thing that I'm repeating to myself is, now it's just slipped my mind, but it's like the universe or the world or life never gives you anything you can't handle, and that's true. You always just handle what life is given you. So it's always just right.
Yeah, exactly. So how about you? What's been new in your life? I mean, you've settled down in St. Louis, but looks like you're still traveling a little bit. You've had pretty good success in your business, art of venture and consulting and everything like this. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, well, actually, one thing that's coming up to talk about right now is we were in Portugal early this year, and the reason we're sort of buying this house is because my wife said, we're done with traveling, or I'm done with traveling. This is hard. We have two kids, and we were in Portugal, and we were in this tiny surfing village that wasn't Lisbon, which is where all the stuff is happening. But we thought, oh, it'll be nice and peaceful in this sort of agricultural surfing community, and it was very peaceful. But most of the other citizens there were, farmers, a generation older than us. There wasn't a lot of, and we didn't speak Portuguese, so we didn't integrate very well in the community. And it felt real, we noticed more than anywhere else that we were missing friends. And that definitely sort of affected how we viewed the experience, because Portugal itself is beautiful. And we have all these great stories and experiences, but it was largely just a few friends that came to visit us. Some family came to visit us. But then we were sort of experiencing the country just as our family, which was different. It's like not integrating as much. And so one thing is like when people ask us about Portugal, I find it hard to say Portugal was nice. Portugal was interesting. Portugal, we didn't like it as much as we thought. It's like, it's hard to summarize all of this into a response. But then always travel is hard to summarize into a response. How do you, like if someone asks you about a place you've been, what do you say about it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my own experiences definitely, color that, and if I didn't have, good friends or anything like this there, then that would definitely affect it. But I many times kind of tailor it to whoever the person who's asking, and especially if I know them a little bit and maybe know what they might like, if they like fancier stuff or just really cheap stuff, or if they're into extreme sports or into music or something like this, I would kind of tailor it to them and be like, hey, well, Vienna has great music, has a great music scene, classical music and everything like this. That's kind of the place to go for that. So stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I guess you can't avoid your own experience of it, and a lot of that, like your social life, or just even something mundane like, oh, it was rainy that day, or it was just really bad weather, we were there during a hurricane or something like this, and just that really would affect what your opinion is of a place. So I think that's kind of natural. But yeah, I mean, I think maybe what you were experiencing in Portugal was like you felt a little bit more like intruders or foreigners or something like this, and you maybe didn't feel so welcome as you did before, and maybe like you realize like, okay, home is home, and really there's no place like home, and everywhere else like people can be nice, but maybe it's not to the same level as home.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely, and we experience when we're in St. Louis, everywhere we go, this is a big city, there's 3 million people here, but basically everywhere we go, somebody recognizes me. I see someone that I grew up with, see someone, maybe one of my parents' friends. And so to have that kind of experience in an enormous city feels like you're in a small town. And there's no replacement for running into people. My granddad, he spends probably every day, he like goes to run an errand. He goes to the post office multiple days a week when he could do it all at once, but just for the simple like joy of running into people that I think, which is so old school, but also so wonderful.
Yeah, I think people definitely need that. Like we're kind of tribal, mentalities, and we do need to run into the 150 people that are in our tribe, and then you recognize them. So I think that's a big part of it, and that's definitely what was missing for me for the traveling. And it's good for a while to be anonymous and to be meeting lots of new people, and just to make friends like that. Just really within an hour, you're like best friends, and maybe you know them better than some of the people back at home. And that was actually something that was kind of bothering me when, it was looking like I was going to have to move away from Florida, because, I had been here for a year and kind of had set up my friends and had a really, kind of big, but also small and tight friends group. So like on one side, it was, very big and like people could go in and out. But on the other side, like I knew a lot of people and very closely. So, and to have to set that up again, and not that it's impossible, not that it's hard, it's just effort. It's just more time. And again, it's going to take like 6 months or a year, something like this. And I kind of lucked out with some cool events here, and, there'd have to be some similar events in another place. So I don't know. I mean, like it really is important, that social, I don't know, aspect and everything like this. And if you don't have that, like even the best place like Hawaii or something like this could seem like a hellhole.
Yeah. And it does take effort, it's like, okay, I got to make a bunch of new friends because I'm going to be in this country for a few months. Like, got to prioritize that right away when I get there, and building relationships, and like that means like actually spending time with people, and you really have to prioritize that. And I think that's one thing. I think a lot of people say about their jobs. Their coworkers are their favorite thing about their jobs, besides actually getting. If they don't like the actual work they're doing, but at least they like the people. And I think universities especially really cultivate that sort of, they're like an even bigger version of the open floor plan, where you have these chance encounters and sort of like the collaborative conversations when you crossing the commons and you see a colleague from a different department and you just talk about things. And that's kind of what I love about the vibe of universities and academic institutions, that they sort of have this, forcing you to run into people that you sort of tangentially know on a regular basis.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. And I have heard a lot of stories about people like once they leave universities, men especially, like men don't make friends as well or as easily as women do apparently. But yeah, as soon as they leave or anybody leaves the university life, then it's just like, oh, I don't have any more friends, and we're not really taught like how to make friends, and travel kind of does that because you have to, because if you don't, then it's very obvious like, oh, I don't have any friends and I'm not talking to anybody, and so it can be more obvious because if you're at home and at work or something, like, you're talking to people, you're interacting with people, but you might be like, well, it's still not the same talking to the cashier or something like this as it is talking to the guy from geology and kind of asking how he's doing, or learning a little bit about that. So I think somehow integrating that in your life, and you seem lucky in St. Louis to be able to have this, but yeah, many people don't have that, and you kind of have to appreciate it, recognize when it exists, and maybe plant your butt there.
Yeah, for sure. So we can. So I just wanted to veer down that path, but we can go back to if you want to hear the update. The thing I think that you find most interesting is this book project that I'm working on, and it's very in align with travel wisdom, and it's basically how leadership develops, how identity develops through travel experiences, transformation through travel or through going to festivals like Burning Man, and also through psychedelic experiences, because that is, so many people are realizing that that's a powerful tool now. And I'm just, hearing a lot of stories from people that's been a big part of their transformation of their identity as well. So I'm in the sort of research phase of, preliminary writing phase of that book. And I probably want to pick your brain a little bit more for some stories about that at some point as well.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds really cool. And yeah, this will be your second book, right? Like Superconductors was your first one. How did that go, actually? I didn't really hear a debriefing on that.
Yeah. So, first book, there was in the process of writing it, I was constantly questioning, like, is this good? Is it not good? I was sort of like had lost context of just how good or not good it was. But we've gotten a lot of good feedback from the book in terms of people carrying it around with them and using it sort of like a manual where they can sort of flip through and access little bits and pieces as needed, or there's using it as like a constant resource. So that's super cool to see how people are reading it, to see the feedback, and so it is valuable for a lot of people. And also, we were expecting it, like I thought, it's gonna be translated into all these languages. Like we had already, before the book launched, we had pre-orders from sort of Southeast Asia countries and Central Europe countries. And I was like, this is gonna be huge. And it definitely wasn't as big as I thought it was gonna be. So there's a little bit of disappointment, but also because we know that people like it, there's still a lot of marketing that I can do, and so I'm working on figuring out other ways to get it into people's hands. And so it could be a sleeper hit, but there's a lot of things, a lot of lessons from a first time book. Like it's actually a much better project going with a traditional publisher and having a really good editor and having a lot of people read the book. That's a really important part of the process for creating a sort of a work that stands the test of time, I think.
Yeah, for sure. That's really cool. I mean, it's good to hear that you enjoyed the process or that you learned a lot from it. And like the numbers aren't too important. I mean, it's more kind of a reference potentially for you grandchildren or something like this later on. And then once you become famous later on, that book will also explode.
Yeah, you when you think about some of these people that they blow up on YouTube or something. I was reading this story about this, woman who does like makeup tutorials on YouTube, and she had done 150 of these over, several years. And then one of them was about, how Lady Gaga does her makeup. And then she sort of blew up, but she had this backlog of videos for people to watch. So all of a sudden, each of those videos was getting millions of views, and her overall brand just, took off. I think she was one of the fastest billionaires ever, or something like that. Now, I may be mixing up stories, but basically it's like if you have a backlog of work, like people will go back and read the previous stuff you've written. If you come out, if my second book is even more successful, people might be interested to read the first. So, and it's the same in science. If you publish some papers, right, people are going to be interested to read your other work. So it's really important to like basically be prolific, continue creating. Like if you look at the Beatles, if you look at Picasso, these folks were just like producing a massive amount of work in total.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's also a question of practice. Like you could become a viral hit, viral sensation or something like this, but you might not have the practice in order to, maintain that. But if you had done, 150 episodes or something like this, then you'd be like, okay, I kind of know how to continue. And it looks like this was popular, so I'm going to kind of go in this theme. Versus if that was your first one, then it'd be like, woof, well, I don't know what to do. Like that was just kind of a random thing. I can't believe this happened. And I think you'd have bigger stress as what to do next. So I think that practice and that kind of muscle memory again is important for that. So yeah, and I don't know about for you, like for the podcast, you see the downloads, and I would say maybe half of them aren't for the most recent episodes, for the most, I don't know, the last month or something like this. The rest are just kind of this long tail, maybe a few episode downloads here and there, but that really adds up to, whatever, half of the monthly downloads or something like this. Is that for you too?
Yeah, for sure. And, it's interesting when people say like, I went back and I listened to all of your shows from the beginning. And that, first of all, that blows me away. Like I'm probably embarrassed I haven't gone back to listen to my earlier shows, but I definitely would be embarrassed at how I was asking questions or how it was produced or things like that. And I'm like, oh, you don't want to listen to that stuff. Just listen to the new stuff, where now I'm actually good. But people seem to appreciate also seeing somebody get better at something. Like if they listen to a podcast I did 5 years ago versus now, and a few in between, they can see like I'm actually probably better prepared or, better asking questions or more understanding of my guests or all these things. I think there's people like to see other people getting better at things.
Interesting. Maybe it's like they can then see themselves getting better at something. Like, oh, they weren't born this way, to quote a Lady Gaga song. So maybe it gives them hope for whatever they're working on too.
Yeah, so there's actually a YouTube channel. Mike Boyd, his channel is called Learn Quick, I believe, and it's grown pretty fast. I think he probably has 1 million subscribers or more by now. But he's very endearing, and he shows his process of sort of mastering a small skill, like learning how to kickflip a skateboard or learning how to juggle or something like that. And he tries to learn it as fast as he can. But in a 5-minute YouTube video about it, you see him drop the balls a lot, or you see him fall a lot. And first of all, you're like, you feel empathetic, right? You feel like, oh, I've fallen too, and I've tried something. And so we like to, anyway, it helps me feel better about myself to see like him failing, but eventually getting it right. And we can celebrate when he finally figures out how to do a thing. And I think, watching my kids learn something and, like trying to walk, oh my gosh, there's so many falls, but then eventually they're just running around and they've got it. And it's such a joyful thing to like see, like, wow, you can try, and eventually you've got it, which is very fun to see in someone else.
Yeah, definitely. And then, once you've done that a few times, like for me with languages, I've learned some languages, and so it's just kind of more of the same. And you're just like, okay, well, rinse, cycle, repeat, and you can get to that level. And now I'm realizing like, oh, okay, well, I want to learn piano, and so I have to put that same amount of effort into that as I did with the languages. So it becomes maybe a little bit more automated or a little bit more normal or something. It's not like this huge, like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? So yeah, I think that's really cool. And I think having children would be a great way to be like, if he can learn to walk, I can learn to knit, or I can learn to cook.
Yeah. So you're learning piano right now?
Yeah. Just kind of learning piano a little bit here and there, learning the chords and everything like this. I don't really want to do lessons right now. I don't really want to have a teacher right now. Just kind of learn the basics. I guess through as much as I can through YouTube videos. But it's sometimes. I don't know, like I have to sit by it, and it's sometimes a chore. So I haven't practiced as much as I wanted to. So it's a little bit unfortunate.
All right, another great episode with Ladan. We actually call him Uncle Ladan. My kids know him. My wife knows him. So it's always great to collaborate and great to have him back on the show. And I mentioned at the beginning of the episode about the League of Superconductors. And if that's something that you're thinking about, if you want insight on how to apply metaphysics, brain science, ancient wisdom into your business practices. I'm also going to be teaching you marketing and sales, positioning, and all these personal skills that you need to be a top-level entrepreneur. Your charisma, your mindset, all this peak performance stuff that I've gotten from the world of athletics, of sports, of cycling. We're going to all be rolling this into a group mastermind. There's nothing else like it out there. So you can check out the details at derekloudermilk.com in the coaching tab. And that's starting in February 2020. Or you can just send me an email, connect with me on social media, and we can chat more about that program. And of course, if you found this episode interesting or helpful, would love for you to share it with your friends. And please do subscribe and leave a rating and review for the show if you haven't already. That really helps boost the show up in the rankings and helps other people find out about the show. So if you found it useful, then probably other people will too. All right, thank you so much for listening. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.